subject, social studies. English people. Now, our subject, depending on how you look at it, in the SOLs, there are hundreds and hundreds of individual facts that are just absolutely essential knowledge. Sounds really important. Essential knowledge. You need to know this about this person on this date times 400 years of history in the case of U.S. history. World history, even more. NCSS breaks it down for us a little differently into the 10 themes, which I have pages for in my portfolio. And really, what it comes down to me is social studies is people, it's places, it's power, and it's resources. And in thinking about social studies on a bigger picture level, I think that I was able to communicate to my students much more effectively rather than saying, here are the 650 things you need to know about U.S. history. Telling history is an overall story. A couple of artifacts to point out from my portfolio on this are the standards page, which are each one of the NCSS themes. Each one of these themes, since I am a social studies teacher now, I guess, coming from a perspective of where have I been, how have I experienced each one of these themes. So I anchored each theme with a picture of a place that I've been. This one is a picture of Chinatown in San Francisco where I was last summer. And I write about how that theme has impacted me and what it means to me. I think that it's one thing to stand up and talk to students and give a presentation, but it's an entirely different thing to go up in front of the class and show that you're a human and be able to tell a cohesive story and be able to say, this place we're talking about, I was there. And I'm very lucky to have had extensive travel experiences growing up, as well as through college. And that's something that I plan to continue to do. And I have a different theme, different picture. This one's my family, my grandfather, my dad, and I. Just people that are important to me. And I've anchored each one of my NCSS themes as far as places that I've been and how that's impacted me. I think that if you talk about instruction in a way that it's about you and your experiences, you're much more likely to be able to impact students and to be able to reach the students. All right. Now our culture. This word came out, and I think it's because I was teaching American history, but it got used several hundred times throughout the course of all of my documents. American and America and other forms of it. But this is our culture. It's the culture that I was raised in, fairly locally to Blacksburg, and it is where I've traveled extensively. And it's really the social context that I grew up in. It's where I went to school. It's where I went to college. So it's obviously going to impact me in a lot of different ways. And this year, I had the opportunity to work with some students who are not native-born Americans that were from India, Latin America, and being able to work with students that grow up in a different social context is really eye-opening and also absolutely incredibly challenging. Now, this is something that I think I can connect to a lot because I had an experience last year as a part of going with the 2009 cohort to the inauguration. And I've included this under NCSS Theme 10, Civic Ideals and Practices. And this is a picture where I was at the inauguration with Dr. Hicks, Matt, and Charlie, and the rest, the 2009 cohort. But I think this really does a lot to explain what civic ideals and practices is, and really gets at the heart of what social studies is about. This was an experience that I was able to share to at both schools this semester, and it was something that students would come up to me after class and want to talk about. What was it like being there? Of course, I haven't quite thawed out from being there yet. The short answer is very cold. But this is one of the more proud moments I've had just at being an American. Peaceful gathering of over 2 million people in an area to watch an exchange of power after a pretty contested election. That was pretty important to me and really reminded me a lot of what it was that I hoped to accomplish as a teacher as well as a citizen. A little bit of stuff that I have about this. Again, the NCSS lesson from last fall that I adapted into my unit plan this semester, and it is one of the lessons that I learned the most from, simply because I tried to make it work. And this is what it looked like at the end of last semester. Rationale, this is something that students will probably be interested in, that they probably don't know about, and also, as is the reality in teaching, it's in the SOLs, and that was something that had to be covered. Talking about propaganda, how that impacts democratic ideals, NCSS themes, and all this alignment that gets very tedious to do, and then you get into the classroom and you're like, oh wait, how do I actually take this lesson and put it into practice? And when I taught it, it didn't look anything like this. I had to adjust for different technology, I had to adjust for different levels of student engagement, different levels of background knowledge. In short, I had to make it work when it didn't seem like it was going to. Another artifact out of this thing, excuse me, is my student growth project, which is a very interesting project to do that was also one of the more frustrating assignments that I've ever done. But I titled it, Do I Really Have to Write in History Class? Yes, you do. That was the question that I got from my students when I gave this assignment, and it was the bickering that I heard all the way through it. I see a couple of you smiling because you're like, yeah, it was. At times it felt like that I was pulling teeth, but in this lesson I was really able to, by evaluating students' writing over the course of the semester and working with them, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes as a group, I was able to go in and really find out what they thought about history and to give them ownership over the subject, which was something that, by their reactions, they had never had before. Very powerful, and I think that it does a lot to support civic ideals and practices in terms of what students really want to know. Then, back over here, Dr. Cater's favorite word, technology. Yes.